the role of technology is so central now, not just AI, but many other technologies, blockchain, IoT, so on and so forth, that if you're going to be a leader without having input on the actual technology, on how the technology affects your business model, how you're going to transition towards that business model, if you're not going to have a strong input, add value on that, you're not going to have the right impact. So the modern leader can't be a technology expert on everything, but you do need to at least be an expert on how to apply that technology, how to innovate your business model to fully utilize that technology. And you also need to be an expert on typical ways technology affects people and relationships with people.
Let's elaborate a little bit more on sort of why trust is so fundamental. There are many other dimensions that you would actually could develop and talk about the relationship between humans and technology. Why trust as the critical one?
AI is more unpredictable. In one situation, it can not cause a problem, and then you can apply the same thing again, and it causes a problem. So we had that example of a company that asked their agentic AI to find bugs in their systems, and it deleted their systems and their backups. That was an unexpected reaction. That was something that the agentic AI should have been in a position to handle, for example. So we need to think about how we can embed the trust in the technology.
Trust is necessary whenever there's an interaction between two sides and at least one faces some kind of risk. What I find really powerful is this idea of connecting trust with risk, which we spoke about also earlier. Can you say more about what you mean by that?
Purely a question of who wins the race at putting more AI, So if you can innovate your business model better and set it up in a sustainable way for success, then you will win the race. But if you focus on putting more AI than the other people, then it's a big gamble.
Coming from Madrid, Spain, and Boston, USA, this is the AI-dialogos podcast, where leaders talk AI. Our guest today is Dr. Alex Zarifis, a leading expert on building trust-based systems in AI, blockchain, insurtech, and fintech. He's a research affiliate at the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance and a lecturer at University of Southampton. We sat down with Alex to discuss his new book, Leadership with AI and Trust.
Let me just start with a simple question of what problem were you trying to solve when you wrote this book, and why now?
Yeah, so that's probably the right place to start. What is the actual problem? And the main problem is that the role of the leader is changing. But the change now is more dramatic and fundamental. So if we look at books on leadership until recently, there were different perspectives, but one of the key themes was that you're not there to be the expert. You're there to bring the talents together. You don't need to be a technology expert. You're just there to bring the right team together, lead them through. And this idea of the leader being focused on people worked very well until recently. But the role of technology is so central now, not just AI, but many other technologies, blockchain, IoT, so on and so forth, that if you're going to be a leader without having input on the actual technology, on how the technology affects your business model, how you're going to transition towards that business model. If you're not going to have a strong input, add value on that, and you're going to hope that other people in your team come up with that, you're not going to have the right impact. So the modern leader can't be a technology expert on everything, but you do need to at least be an expert on how to apply that technology, how to innovate your business model to fully utilize that technology. And you also need to be an expert on typical ways technology affects people and relationships with people.
Got it. That's well said. Well said. Let me elaborate a little bit more on this concept of how do you actually understand how technology is affecting the relationships between people and the technology. And that's the core pillar of your book around the concept of developing trust. So let's elaborate a little bit more on sort of why trust is so fundamental. There are many other dimensions that you would actually could develop and talk about the relationship between humans and technology. Why trust as the critical one?
Yes, trust was always an issue where there was risk. Why is it a more central issue now? It's partly because there are more risks coming from many different directions, and also because the typical ways we would either build trust or trust would just emerge naturally are starting to go away. If we go back 20, 30 years, it emerged naturally through human interaction, bonding with people, having shared values in your organization. These things are slowly going away. We're more insular, working from home. So we also have the technology risks. AI is more unpredictable. In one situation, it can not cause a problem, and then you can apply the same thing again, and it causes a problem. So we had that example of a company that asked their agentic AI to find bugs in their systems, and it deleted their systems and their backups. That was an unexpected reaction. That was something that the agentic AI should have been in a position to handle, for example. So we need to think about how we can embed the trust in the technology. So this was something that became very popular with blockchain technology. Can we actually embed some trust into the technology? Can we embed some trust into our business model, how we operate? And then can we also think about how we lead a team through the digital transformation and support trust along that process? The goal is to have the right level of trust in what we're doing. If AI and our agentic AI isn't entirely predictable, then we don't want to trust it blindly, but we need to have the right level of trust. And like many things, the way I see it is that we're going through a process of educating ourselves and educating our organization on what the technology can do, what it can't do.
Absolutely. When you talk about this just forging trust, you also mentioned that it's important to actually set that trust early on, whether it is, as you said, through the technology, whether it is in the business model, or whether it is, through the process of digital transformation. Just help us understand, when you don't do that early on, what are the consequences?
Yeah, so when a disruptive technology like AI comes along, it helps us appreciate the things we used to have that we took for granted. So traditionally, in addition to things I've mentioned, like shared values, an organization would implement the way they wanted to work through their enterprise systems, for example. They'd structure what people did through enterprise systems from SAP and other companies that would work in a certain way. The governance was built into those systems. So now we're kind of exploring things with agentic AI, and we don't have that built-in governance in many situations. The biggest danger would be going through the digital transformation, focusing just on the efficiencies, looking at the numbers, and not thinking about what's actually happening in your organization and what people are going through. I don't have my eye on the day-to-day realities. I don't have my eye on how trust is being eroded with various stakeholders. And then things build up. And when the problem emerges, it might be too late.
Alex, just do you have a blatant example where a leader totally underinvested in building that trust? It didn't communicate appropriately. It didn't put in the emphasis on explaining what was the journey and why. Sort of any in your research, and we know you've extensively covered the topic of trust and how to build it and when.
Yeah, I won't say names of companies, but one nice example is some organizations that offered health insurance. They would collect the information through a form, and then they had static code analyzing the information the person gave, and they would get some quote. This was like the normal way of doing things. And they went too far in implementing AI too quickly. Their chatbot didn't have the right behavior. People didn't feel trust in the organization because they felt this was something private, quite formal. If you give me a form to put my personal information in, that's what I'm comfortable with. If you have a chatbot being too casual and friendly, and we're trying to talk about my personal information and health insurance, it rubs me the wrong way. And that's kind of an example of how, well, the efficiency was better. Maybe the risk being assessed by AI was done more accurately than the static code based on traditional data like age, so on and so forth. But the trust was eroded.
Got it.
I'd like to focus a little bit on, like formally, how you characterize trust in one of your papers. So, your recent book is Leadership with AI and Trust, and we've been talking a little bit about that. But I also have found another research paper that you published along with your colleague. It's called A Model of Trust in FinTech and Trust in InsurTech, Artificial Intelligence and the Context Influence It. And in that article, you lead with this statement, and it's based on research that other people have done, say trust is necessary whenever there's an interaction between two sides and at least one faces some kind of risk. Okay. And what I find really powerful is this idea of connecting trust with risk, which we spoke about also earlier. Can you say more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, that's at the heart of a lot of these things, and often we don't talk about it because we have some vague idea of what it involves. But if there's no risk, if something is completely secure, then you don't need to trust someone. When there is some kind of risk, then you need some kind of trust. When we're doing things online, especially when we're talking about highly regulated sectors like finance or health, there are various risks. So from cybersecurity to wrong calculations that might affect us, we might lose money through wrong assessments in insurance or finance or health, and also how our personal data will be used. So will I go to get insurance and I'll be given a higher quote because 10 years ago I gave some information about my health to someone. So especially when you talk about highly regulated sectors, there are many different risks, and the organization needs to manage those risks in the best way possible and then be transparent about how this is done. So again, we're not talking about brainwashing or tricking someone. We're talking about implementing our operations in the best way possible to manage risk, and then being as transparent about this as possible. Moving forward, where we're going to be, what's the best word, dominated by AI in our workplace? I don't know what the best word is. I think a lot of
the case.
Yeah. So this also has to be there in some shape or form. And to kind of take it a step further, traditionally, beyond the organization and the specific relationship, we also have the role of some key institutions. So if those key institutions choose to take a back seat and not affect this, which often happens, then more weight falls on the organization to build that trust. If you have these key institutions engaging and saying there's some kind of personal information privacy regulation or so on and so forth, then they take some of the weight of the trust building of the organization in that relationship.
Totally.
I'd like to do a follow-up and isolate one part of what you just said, and that's the idea of regulation. And I'm going to go back a ways to Adam Smith. This might be an overstatement, but I think it's generally accurate. I think Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations, he may not use the word trust, but it's a similar concept. I think he would say that the whole idea of a market can't get off the ground unless there's trust. And an example of that would be and you mentioned this, when you have face-to-face interaction, that's one thing. But once I start entering the market, I have to transact business with strangers. And that takes me to a completely different ballgame, because how can I trust a stranger? And so then there have to be assurances that when I do a contract with a stranger, the stranger will fulfill that contract. And so then we have things like laws. So that's one guarantor of trust, where, hey, I sign a contract with a stranger. On my own, I have no guarantees that the stranger is going to uphold their end of the bargain. But I have assurances, because I believe in the legal system, that if I need to challenge the other party, then there's a mechanism for that. And I think Smith goes beyond that laws alone themselves are not inadequate. We have to have other forms of trust. So now I'm going to come back to regulation. So in regulated industries, that one could say that that's kind of mechanism for ensuring trust, right? And what you point to in your article is, let's call it high stake transactions. These are transactions that, and your examples of fintech and insurtech, these are, I'm going to use my term, high stake transactions, in the sense that, as you point out, it involves a lot of money and takes place over long periods of time. When I take out an insurance, a home mortgage, other types of financial transactions, it's with some entity, and I need trust. I need trust that my transactions are going to be safe. And so we have regulations to address that. Now, one of the interesting things, and I'll get to my question, is, all right, with AI, there are parties that say, hey, no regulations, impediments. Regulations are just impediments. We have to go faster. So that opens up, how can I trust transactions that take place in the AI space? And then the flip side of it is, that might be an opportunity. Suppose it's kind of a wild, wild west, and I'm an organization that needs to play in this wild, wild west. If I can put in mechanisms so that potential customers can trust me. So anyway, I would be interested in your thoughts about the role of regulation. Should there be more? Should there be less when it comes to AI? And how does that connect up with the idea of trust?
Yeah, so you've opened up a lot of interesting points there. I think we could have like an hour's discussion on that. It's such a fascinating topic. I'm definitely not an expert on Smith and economics, but my sense of what he wanted was to move from the government controlling the economy to more open market economics. So he was kind of arguing for decentralization and the institutions acting like a referee, not controlling everything. And so that's where regulation comes in. We don't want the government to fully control AI, but we do want it to act like a good referee in terms of regulation. And when I teach my students, I always try to use examples that I've lived through, because they make a bigger impression on you. And I lived through the process of Bitcoin and blockchain, and the good entrepreneurs in that sector back from 2012-13, going and arranging meetings with the regulators, the heads of central banks, the stock market, and asking them to regulate them. So they were going and saying, please regulate us, because they understood that they needed good regulation. We don't want a lot of regulation. We don't want a little regulation. We just want good regulation. So that's a part of it. And so when I got involved in financial technology, the kid in me likes the technology, the gadgets, all of that. But increasingly, working with regulators in insurance and so on, you realize that you do need that regulation to be able to innovate in a reasonably safe way, safe for individuals that are getting insurance, loans, buy now, pay later, whatever, and safe for those organizations and the economy. But yeah, the kid in me always gets excited about the technology, but like the adult in me is kind of says that you need the right regulation to actually be able to innovate.
Alex, let me build on this in maybe just one more question around trust. I do want to go back to leadership, which is the other, the core of the book. But since you mentioned the early days of Bitcoin and crypto and later on NFTs, in your book, you talk about how it actually mattered to develop trust in certain components of the process. And you highlight the wallets, the ability to just know that there's a mechanism to resolve disputes, but it was less important at according to your thesis, to actually focus on trust at the time you're purchasing the cryptocurrency, if I understood your comments correctly. Let me take back to the world of AI. Let me focus on agentic AI. This idea of focusing on what parts of the transactions matter most to develop trust, help me understand what should organizations focus on if they really want to raise the level of trust when using agentic AI. Is it everything from the conception to the the overall orchestration of agents? Where would you focus? Can we take from what you saw back then in the crypto space?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important but very difficult question. I could try to at least contribute to what the answer would be. So just taking one more lesson from Bitcoin and blockchain that may relate also to AI is that early Bitcoin adopters were sold this idea that the technology is trustless, so you don't have to worry about it. And they got the vision and everything. The late adopters of Bitcoin don't even know what blockchain is, but they trust it because it's reliable now. So the technology started off by being this kind of selling point. Look, this is trustworthy. Now it isn't a selling point. Most people that buy Bitcoin don't know what blockchain is, but because it's reliable, they trust it. So I think I definitely don't have all the answers in relation to AI, but I think the key point is you have to be the best at innovating in your business model, setting up the organization in a way that it can be successful in a sustainable way. It's not purely a question of who wins the race at putting more AI.
Okay.
So if you can innovate your business model better and set it up in a sustainable way for success, then you will win the race, let's say. But if you focus on putting more AI than the other people, then it's a big gamble. But yeah, I don't claim to have all the answers. It's something that we're kind of living through now.
But I think your analysis of blockchain became reliable, crypto, for late users, it really didn't matter if they understood the technology underlying the currency. It was reliable. And so I think as leaders innovate on their business model, this idea of building reliability and trust early on might actually get them a few leaps ahead of their competitors. Anyway, so let me just, because I think we're super clear on trust as a building block. Got it. We get it. Now let me go back to the individual. Let me go back to those leaders that actually need to manage people and technology. What changes? You started the conversation saying leadership has changed. What changes should they be making at an individual level?
Yeah, so before AI, leadership evolved very gradually. Leadership evolves because society, technology, the zeitgeist of our times evolves. And it was going through a very gradual transition from a more authoritarian approach that worked in the past because someone had more power. They didn't have to focus so much on motivation. And gradually, for various reasons, shorter contracts, globalization, people are more free to move. The shift of leadership went more towards motivating people.
Mm-hmm.
So then we have the situation with AI emerging. And again, leadership changes because now the leader needs to say, okay, wait a minute. This isn't just about motivating people. This is about thinking about that digital transformation process. You can call it a project. So people that work in project management look at it and say, yeah, this is a project, obviously. But because AI keeps changing, it's like an ongoing project. It's like a series of projects. So if that helps someone kind of frame it in their mind, then you can look at it as an ongoing series of projects. And you have to think about how you can have a positive impact in each of those stages and what people need. So a simple example is if people don't understand what the main vision is, what we're trying to do, then you need to act as a transformational leader and manage to get people on board, sell the vision, sell the plan. If you're at a point where everyone knows what they're doing and the bottleneck is resources or something else, you need to act either as a transactional leader that organizes things or a servant leader that understands what people actually need to do their job. So that's a simple example of how you shift the focus. So an experienced leader does this instinctively, so I'm not going to tell a leader with 30 years experience, make sure you make a transition from transformational to servant leader at this point. But when we talk about these terms, it helps us get into the right mindset, think about these issues, and then we'll probably react in a good way. So it's not about having this rigid idea of, okay, there are 6 stages, and on the day that I go from stage 1 to stage 2, I need to make this switch. It's about giving us ideas about what we can do to have a good impact.
I hear you. So in this idea of managing a process and really understanding the transformation as a process, I like to challenge the idea of you've got to sort of evolve as a leader from a transactional to servant to transformational. How easy is it for a single individual to really develop those different facets of leadership throughout the phases of the of this project that you call digital transformation or AI transformation for that same individual?
Yeah, so that's a good point, and it's a valid criticism or challenge because it is a challenge. So many people, they try to stay true to their character, but we all play a role. We play a different role at home, we play a different role at work, and we adapt our character to fit what we're supposed to do. If I talk to my students, I have a more of a kind of parental role, a kind of looking at a feeling of I need to look after them, they're quite young. If I'm talking to a colleague, I play a different role. So we develop our ability and our skills and our knowledge. And I see this as one more step. So, but it is true that someone might say, for example, it doesn't fit who I am to be a transformational leader. I'm not that guy that's going to sell people a vision and inspire people. It's just not who I am. I'm the guy that gets things done. I'd rather be a servant leader or a transactional leader. So that's true. And maybe someone will look at this and say that isn't for me, and that's fair enough. But I think it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, and there's no question. I mean, leaders need to, they have different roles and they have multiple facets that they can lean on depending on the challenge of the day, so to speak. Let me just go back to the idea of how is this different with AI, but instead of seeing it as a process, may I just think about it slightly differently? And when I think about leadership, I think about first the concept of, leading self, leading teams, leading the organization, potentially leading innovation and leading into the future. So if I may just start with leading self, how is AI altering that first pillar of self-leadership for the leader?
Yeah, so that's a useful way to look at it, to kind of divide it out in that way. That's very helpful. So in terms of the first one, leading myself, my feeling is that it goes back to educating. So I need to first educate myself on AI. And if I don't get to the point where I can develop the new AI model for deep AI, fine, but I need to educate myself as well as possible and then be in a position to educate others on it. So I would argue that's one of the things I need to do when I'm looking at myself. The second one was leading others.
Yeah, and you have the whole book is around the challenge of managing humans and
Yeah.
technology. So how would you lead others differently
Yeah.
in the age of AI?
Yeah. So linking that to the things we spoke about, it would be that you need to innovate in how the business operates. So you need to impact that innovation with your ideas and your vision. So if we look at a lot of the people that are successful today, they are the smartest person in the building. It's like there's this kind of cliche that you don't need to be the smartest person in the building, but a lot of the most successful people are, and they have this impact. I don't think a leader should just be limited to getting the best out of other people. I think they should be able to have that impact on what the business does.
Got it. And of course, if we think about leading an organization into the future, it is about really uncovering the opportunities that are unique to the business. And you have been talking about the importance of adapting the business model with the right level of trust, but no question, with the right efficacy in actually gaining customers and share and so on. Anything you would like to add on that step? And Al, I'm going to pass it on to you if you have any other comments, but any final comment on that stage of what does the leader need to know to actually steer the organization towards the future?
Yeah, just one thing. Some of my students tell me I talk too much about business models. But I tell them that it's because the way the industry is set up now as an ecosystem, it really is about how you position yourself in that ecosystem that enables you to get the most out of things. So we're not in this old situation where you were at some point in a value chain and the way you operated was just, okay, what's the most efficient way to work, So it's now an ecosystem, whether it's the financial ecosystem or another one. And where you position yourself in that, understanding the new opportunities that AI creates is how you're going to get the most out of it. So if you're stuck in your old ways and you're saying, okay, I'm just going to focus on getting the most out of other people, and you get outmaneuvered by other organizations that position themselves better in the ecosystem to get more out of AI, then you won't have the best results. So yeah, hopefully people realize why I talk about that so much.
It makes total sense.
Yeah.
Any final comments?
Yeah, I'm going to describe a phenomena that I think we're seeing in the US. I'm not sure to what extent it's true in Europe and other countries. Let me call it the AI backlash. There's now AI is the new two-letter dirty word. So why is that? The ordinary man and woman on the street. Now, when I say ordinary man and woman on the street, it's not just poor and working class. Now we have middle class. And when they begin to think about AI, the first thing that comes to mind is AI is going to take my job. That's number one. And if I have a job, there's a great deal of fear that I will lose my job soon. And second, AI is really, the benefits of AI are accruing to the very top. So a summary of that would be AI as a technology. Now, the AI backlash is high level of mistrust in the technology and fear and mistrust. So now coming to a question, if I'm a leader in an organization, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very, very important and very, very difficult question. Yeah. So this is something that we all face. It is going to be a very different world in 10 years' time. So this is a real challenge. The simple answer is that I encourage people, whether they're young, thinking about studying a degree, or in the middle of their career, where at whatever point they are in, to try and educate themselves about AI and become part of the conversation. So many of us as professionals, as citizens, we need to be part of the conversation, and to the degree that we can, affect where things are going. And I think that's enough for us. We can't have our way all the time, but we need to be able to be knowledgeable about the issues and the challenges and affect the conversation like you are doing and like more people should do. And part of that is knowing what the real challenges are, knowing what the real benefits are. So that's probably a really general, high-level answer.
Very good.
I think if we get involved, then you can shape the future. So if you don't get involved, then the chances that you'll be happy with what the world will look like in 10 years are pretty low. And you'll just complain about it. Whereas if you do engage and educate yourself, you can shape things to some degree, and to a degree, you'll recognize why some decisions that you didn't want were made. So you'll be more engaged in what is happening. And I think that's enough for us.
Great. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great having you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right, that's a wrap.